Welcome to Research Debrief, the podcast that aims to bridge the gap between the latest science and the health and fitness industry in under 20 minutes. Welcome, Luke.
Good to see you, Rachel.
Same. All right, what is the topic of discussion for today?
Yeah, we have a new paper that was published this fall. The paper was published in the journal Medicine Science, Sport and Exercise. So this is a high impact factor journal. It's the American College of Sports Medicine's journal. The paper is titled Without Fail: Muscular Adaptations in Single Set Resistance Training Performed to Failure or with Repetitions in Reserved. So this is a randomized control trial, and I'll just kind of talk us through what's going on in this paper and why it's so important. Now, we've mentioned on the podcast in the past that we want to look at meta-analytical studies, which is a collection of all the research on a particular topic. It's essentially a collection of studies. This is not a collection of studies. It's a randomized control trial, so it's one study. What they were looking at in this study was what works better: doing one set of a strength training exercise. So again, this paper is about strength training, one set to muscle failure, which means you go to the point where you can't possibly do another repetition. You literally get stuck, okay? Or doing one set, so both groups are doing one set, or you go one set almost to failure. And so we would call that reps in reserve. And in this particular study, they trained to 2 reps in reserve. So that group was taught how to get to the point where they got really close to failure, but they didn't actually fail. And 2 reps in reserve is really close to failure. Let's be clear. Most people, when they strength train, they actually strength train about 7 to 9 reps in reserve. So we have a lot left in the tank when we strength train normally, according to the research. So group 1 went to all out failure. Group 2 went almost to failure. Now, that's the study design. They had males and females ages 18 to 40 years of age. I think the mean age here was about 23. So we're talking about younger individuals, but we had males and females. Now, why did they perform the study? Why is this study so important for all of our listeners and club operators worldwide? 28% of the US population regularly engages in strength training at least 2 days a week, as recommended by the Federal Physical Activity Guidelines for muscle strengthening. That's how they start off the paper, is very few people are actually engaging in strength training. So it would be worth it to discover more time efficient approaches, right? And of course, one of the major barriers to exercise participation, and this applies to strength training and cardio, is perceived lack of time. So if we can find a way to make it more time efficient, that would be valuable. Now, as a part of the introduction to this particular study, they do mention that evidence suggests that single set resistance training, defined as performing one set of each exercise per session, can be a viable time efficient strategy to promote muscular adaptations. And you're going to hear me say muscular adaptations multiple times. Muscular adaptations mean, did we get stronger? Did our muscles become more enduring? Did we actually increase our muscle size? Do we improve our muscle power, which is commonly measured by things like a vertical jump? So when we say muscular adaptations, it's all of those things. And I'll talk specifically about the adaptations we saw in this paper. Now, the reason the design of this study is so interesting is that they used trained participants. So to be in this study, you had to be strength training at least 3 times a week for the last year. Now, the reason that's noteworthy, and in every study we look at, we should always understand, are these people new to exercise? That's really important to look at. Or are they trained? And the reason that's important is because, well, sometimes things work really well for beginners. You're brand new to strength training. Anything is probably going to work for a while. But it might take something different to work over the long haul. That's why at the start of every research paper that looks at strength training, cardiovascular exercise, we're always clarifying, are these people that are new to exercise, or are they pretty experienced? And in this case, it's young people who have a tremendous amount of strength training experience. And let me just mention what they were doing. They were all of that strength training experience was multiple set strength training. Now, the reason that's noteworthy is that's what most of the world does. Most of our listeners, when they strength train, they perform 3 to 4 sets of each exercise. And that's what most people that go into a health club do, right? And that's what these subjects did. Younger males and females, and they had done multiple set training. So now they enter this study and they're randomly assigned to one of two groups: strength training to all out failure, doing just one set, versus doing one set and having 2 reps in reserve. The study lasted for 8 weeks. They strength trained twice per week. Now, one of the things that we should just pay attention to is it's 8 weeks. So would something have happened differently? Would we have seen a different result if this lasted for 25 weeks? Most strength training studies just aren't that long. 8 weeks is kind of a normal duration. So as a listener, you might think, I wonder what would have happened if it was 12 weeks or 16 weeks or 20 weeks. So this is just 2 months of using this approach. Here's the workout they did twice per week: a front lat pull down, a seated cable row, a machine shoulder press, a machine chest press, a cable tricep pushdown, a dumbbell bicep curl, a Smith machine squat, a plate loaded leg press, and a machine leg extension. So that's a total of 9 exercises. It took them about 30 minutes to do that. And they were trying to do kind of 10 repetitions on each exercise. Now, every one of these sets was supervised by a lab assistant. We love research where there's good supervision, rather than just saying, hey, go in the lab and do this workout, and we don't know if you did it, if you did it right. In this case, did you truly get to muscle failure? Everything was supervised. In the group that went to muscle failure, they had lab assistants providing verbal encouragement to truly get to that point of muscle failure. Now, the group that went to 2 reps in reserve, of course, they didn't receive that same verbal encouragement because they weren't supposed to go to muscle failure. So that's the design of the study. And let me be clear on what they were testing. They were testing muscle strength. So they did that with like a 1 repetition max. They were testing muscle endurance, which means they used a lighter weight and they did as many repetitions as possible. They tested muscle thickness. This is one of the ways we assess, of course, muscle hypertrophy. Did we actually add lean muscle tissue? And they did that via ultrasound, which is a wonderful way to test muscle thickness. And then they tested muscle power. And to test that, they did a vertical jump test. So now we kind of understand the study designs. I think we can jump into the results. Does that sound good?
Yes, I'm very fascinated to hear what the
Yeah.
results were.
Okay, so what they found out was the group that performed one set to muscle failure had greater adaptations than the group that went almost to failure. So our take-home message here is, wow, it turns out that training to muscle failure is pretty important. Now, to be specific, they had greater increases in muscle hypertrophy. So if you want bigger muscles, which we all want to add lean muscle tissue, not just for aesthetic reasons, big biceps is not the key anymore, but we look at muscle as an endocrine organ, and we look at muscle as a great predictor of longevity, death from all causes. So we all want to add muscle, whether or not that's the first thing we think about when we think about strength training. We do want to add muscle. Muscle hypertrophy and muscle power were statistically significantly increased when you went to muscle failure. Strength and muscle endurance were the same between the two groups.
Okay.
So both groups produced really good results. The group that went to failure added more muscle tissue and improved their power more. So that's the first take-home message. I think the second take-home message, which might be just as interesting or more interesting, the group that went almost to failure, 2 reps in reserve, produced better results across all the categories: power, endurance, strength, muscle size, than what they had previously been doing. And of course, what had they previously been doing? 3 to 4 sets of every strength training exercise they did. So what is this study telling us? The study's telling us if you're a young individual, 18 to 40 years of age, and you're really into strength training and you have a lot of strength training experience doing multiple sets, if you cut it down to one set and you go either to failure or close to failure, you're going to produce phenomenal results. You're going to get stronger faster. I don't think, Rachel, anybody on earth is aware of this. Everyone that wants better results, the kind of hardcore people, are going to the gym and they're doing 3, 4, 5 sets of each exercise. And of course, this study says if you're already doing 3, 4, 5 sets and you're really trained, cutting it down to just one set produces phenomenal results if you go to failure or if you almost go to failure. Now, let me mention, this study was conducted at one of the most reputable exercise science labs in the country. And one of our key researchers, one of the key authors, he is a guru in muscle hypertrophy. I mean, I think he is the single academic that has the most publications on this topic. And I think he has a leaning toward volume. Like he generally likes more sets. So when he published this study out of his lab, it even flew in the face of what he had normally probably been talking about. He was probably an advocate of more volume. So I think this outcome even surprised him. And I'm just mentioning that because that's good science, right? When for the longest time you say, I think we need to do more sets to really get our muscles to grow. And then your own lab produces a study that says, oh, it turns out that doing less sets, but just pushing a little bit harder produce better results. I think that part's noteworthy. Our massive take home message on this is 28% of the population is engaged in resistance training, and they think it takes a lot of time. In this study, participants strength trained twice a week for 30 minutes. They did 8 exercises each time. They did one set, and they produced phenomenal results. Not just, hey, at least they were doing something. They produced better results than doing 3, 4, 5 sets per exercise 3 times per week. This is an encouraging message that we can find ways to make our strength training incredibly time efficient. And in making it time efficient, we can actually produce better results.
Yeah. Yeah, very big takeaway. Because like you said, time is a huge barrier. And so if you can get people in and out in under 30 minutes, you're going to be able to reach a lot more people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, not too much more to say, but I think it's very interesting. It kind of sounds like going back to one of the former episodes that we had done on strength training and, what tones versus build strength. It sounds like really the to failure or almost to failure is a common theme that's more important than almost anything.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we have to say, hey, you only have to do one set, but you got to get pretty darn close to that point of failure. And in fact, in this study, at least, that works better than doing 3 or 4 sets, which is what most of the world is doing. So as an operator, you could create programming that says, hey, the workouts could be very short. We're just going to push a little bit harder. And the consumer, right now, the consumer is telling us, I know strength training is important. I'm supposed to do it. I just don't have time. We now have a science-based approach to making it time efficient, and we don't have to compromise results. We can actually produce better results.
Perfect.